Welcome back to the shop, fellow shop rats. As always, it's about spending the day here in the shop. And today, well, we're working on the 70 Stitches Challenger, but we're also working on the Forsyth Duster, and we're working on Scoops, our 73 Dodge Dart Swinger. We got a lot going on. Recently, I just had a whole trailer load of parts dropped off, and quite frankly, I'm concerned. I don't know for sure, but I might have gotten the shaft. Interested? Stick around. I'm Mike.
This is My Cars Shop.
One of the things that came in that trailer was a large bundle of drive shafts, and I need 3 drive shafts right now. So when I say I might have gotten the shaft, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I'm really hoping I got the shaft. I need one for Stitches. I need one for the Forsyth, and I need one for Scoops. So let me talk about what's going on, and then we'll get out our tape measure. And, well, we just got a whole bunch of information and things to process today, and I want to share this with you because I think it's important information. Contrary to popular belief, or contrary to what it appears to be, the wheelbase between an E-body and an A-body isn't much different. Now, we know that the sheet metal platform is quite different between the two, but if you look at this Duster and a 70 CUDA, the wheelbase is the same. It's 108 inches. If you look at a Challenger, it's 2 inches longer at 110, and we verified that as we were hand fabricating the floor pans and reusing some floor pans that either came out of a Charger, 70 and up Charger, or came out of a Barracuda. We're not sure which ones they came out of. And then a Dart, the wheelbase is 111 inches, so it's 3 inches longer on a Dart than it is on a Duster. And that may be surprising, but it is, but it isn't, but it is, but it isn't, but it is, right? So what we're looking for is drive shafts for these vehicles. And I did a lot of research, and I wrote down the numbers that I'm looking for. And the differences are going to be on the rear end size and the transmission size, as well as the wheelbase for the platform. So you're going to see that, like, we're looking for a drive shaft for Scoops, which is different than the drive shaft for the Duster. Now, they're both A bodies, but there's a couple inches difference in wheelbase, but there's also a difference in the transmission. So the drive shaft that we're looking for the Dart is about 49 and a half inches because it's a 904, and we're putting an 8 3/4 rear end in it. It has a 7 1/4 in it right now, so that drive shaft's going to be just a little bit too long. So when we swap out and put that 8 3/4 in it, we're going to need a different drive shaft. On the Duster, we're looking for a drive shaft that's 49 inches because this is also a small block, but it's going to have an A833 4-speed behind it, which is a little different length with an 8 3/4 rear end. And so that's about a 49-inch drive shaft on that. And then on the Challenger, because we're going big block with an A833 4-speed and an 8 3/4 rear end, we need a drive shaft that's about 45 and a half inches. Now, I may have those numbers wrong, and of course, we're not to the point of putting those in the car, but I'm just curious to know, in the collection of drive shafts that we received, as well as the ones I already had, if we have shafts for all of these things. So it raises the question today, did I or did I not get the shaft? One thing I want to note is I did learn that the E-body 4-speed transmission, there was 2 different ones. The overall A833 length is the same, but the E-body specific one that doesn't have the dual shift locations on it is the transmission mount, I think, is in a little different spot. So right now, where the tail housing, because only the tail housing is in there for fabrication, that may not be in exactly the right spot. So that means we may have to change the floor a little bit where I cut the shifter hole. I didn't know that at the time. So some of you E-body experts, John, if you're watching from Life at Speed, can you confirm that there may be an offset mount required to use the dual pattern A833 in a Challenger? I'm not sure of that. I'm not too concerned about it, but it is something I need to know, because if I did get the wrong mount, I need to get the right one and check all of that out before we get too much further along. But anyway, but my understanding is that the dual pattern transmission, which was used both in B and E body, that the mounting location is different and it has a different transmission mount to get it in its proper place in the car. Now, we would discover that, of course, when we put the motor and transmission in the car, but it's nice to know those things ahead of time. And the second piece in that is I think I do have, and I'll look while we're in the warehouse, we're going to go up there soon. I think I do have a straight E-body trans for this, so we may just choose to use a different transmission and just put this one back together again and put it back upstairs. So I know we have some B-body trannies up there, so we'll see. I don't know, but so that's one thing I want to look at. But the other thing is I grabbed my tapeworm, so we've got our tapeworm, and we're going to go up into the warehouse where I store the driveline stuff for the Mopars, and take a look at the drive shafts and do some measuring. One thing I'll note, and you'll see up there, is when we're measuring a drive shaft, we're measuring from yoke center to yoke center, U-joint center to U-joint center, not the outside dimensions of the drive shaft. And that's an important number to remember. If you're going to measure a drive shaft, always measure it from center to center on your U-joints. All right, let's go upstairs. That one's too long for sure. That's 58. What I should do, I'm going to go get my marker and I'm going to get my paper, and we're going to write on every one of these what their length is. So for the future, we will know what they are just at a glance. The second thing is, not that it matters for today, but I think I've got some nice big steel shelves coming to put up here so we can get better organization on some of this stuff, because it's kind of a chaos right now, and I'd really like to get a handle on this stuff so I have a better handle on what's here. So I'll be right back with my paper and a marker. Okay, so we're looking for one around 50, and for a couple, or for two around 50, and then one around 45 and a half. And this one was like a lot longer than that. So this one was like 58-ish. That one's one right there. That one's about 49 and a half. So that's one we need. That would be the one for scoops. So we'll set that one aside. Okay. Need one that's 45 and a half. That's the one that I need the most. Well, look at that. That one is 45-ish. Like 44 and... That one's 44 and 3/4. That could work for the Challenger. So out of all these drive shafts that we've got here so far, don't have one in this pile that's going to, well, we got a couple that might work. So it's good to know. The only one that is 100%, this one here probably will work for the Challenger, and that one will work. My guess is it'll work for the Duster or for scoops. So we'll need to figure that out down the road. And this also is a dual pattern. There's the B-body mount right there. And then there's our E-body mount right back there where that aluminum block is, right there. So I don't have a single E-body transmission mount. Maybe they didn't make one. I know I have one upstairs for a B-body. I think I've got a 3-speed B-body upstairs, 71 and up. And I know I have another 3-speed for a B-body in the 67 outside. Not that any of that matters, but so yeah, it's going to be interesting to sort this out a little bit and find out for sure if maybe that mount is correct, maybe it's not. I don't know. I'll ask John what he knows. He'll be able to set me straight. But yeah, so we have possibly 2 of the 3 drive shafts that we need. Maybe, I think I've got some other ones around. So we'll see what we find when we find. And I'm going to also start looking around to see if we can find one for the Duster, because there should be one somewhere. The 3-speed and the 4-speed should be the same. So the only car that we possibly are lacking the drive shaft for is this, but that doesn't mean that we are. Of course, until we get everything put in the car, we're not going to know exactly what we need. We don't have an 8 3/4 for this right now, so we will either use a B body housing in it, or we will cut down a C body housing and make it work. I might have some A body axles. I have a complete 8 3/4 that's for scoops, but I don't have one for this. And being as scoops is a daily, I really want to put that in there. So we'll see, but that's beside the point right now. Getting the motor and transmission in and getting the rear end under it, obviously, it has a 7 1/4 in it right now. So until we get something in there. But two other things that I remembered. The Golden Mullet has a drive shaft in it that's around 50 to 50 and a half inches. So that could possibly work for one of these projects. I can't find the exact dimensions on that one in my spec sheet, so I'll have to get under that car and measure it, and that's impossible. Right now it's so low to the ground with the frame that collapsed, so that's down the road a ways, but if we need it, we can get it. And the other thing that I forgot about, as I was just sitting here thinking through all the cars, when Joe built the Charger, he didn't have a drive shaft for it, and we measured everything out and determined that the drive shaft that he needed was one that I had it was out of a B body. I remember that. It wasn't out of a 69 B body, but it was the right one. The irony of that is it's the one that I had set aside for my GTS, because it was an inch longer than the one that I put in my GTS. So I had picked up this drive shaft that was exactly the right length for the GTS and just never got around to swapping it out. And when he needed the drive shaft, of course, I gave it to him to put in the Charger. Point being is, I don't know what the length of that shaft is in that GTS, because it's a custom length thing, because I custom built the wheelbase, because I offset the rear end a little bit in that car so I could accommodate and get those great big 31-inch tall tires centered in the wheel wells. So when I built the back of that car, when I back halved it, I adjusted that just a little bit. So I don't remember what that length is, but my point is the drive shaft that's in there is actually a little short. So we might have one upstairs that we could use that would be closer to the right length for what that car needs, and pull that one out, and that may work for this or scoops as well. So we've got options. All in all, to me, it was a very educational day. I spent a ton of time researching drive shaft length sizes to be sure that I had at least somewhat accurate information on what I was looking for. But here's the caveat. Here's the thing that is important to know when you're sizing a drive shaft. The only way, 100% unequivocally, to know what drive shaft length you need is to have your complete rear end in the car with your center chunk in and your yoke mounted, and your engine and transmission mounted properly in the car with a slip yoke slipped into the transmission, and then get your tape measure out and measure your dimension U-joint center to U-joint center. And that will unequivocally let you know. And you want to have about an inch of it not being fully engaged, so that your slip yoke slides in and out as the car moves up and down with the suspension and so forth. I believe an inch shy of full engagement is what I'm trying to say. Now, some of you guys may have a different number. I'm just pulling that one right out of the air, so I may not have that number exactly right, but I think it's pretty close. If you look at the back of a lot of these transmissions, and I don't have something I can show you easily, there's a kind of a rubber flex boot, and usually that allows you about an inch of squish. And so if your slip yoke goes in and just touches against that seal, if you have that thing, that's usually pretty close. It's just to keep the dirt out of the actual seal. It's a dust boot kind of thing. So, well, yeah, drop your thoughts down there. Drop your comments down there. Understand that there's a difference in the wheelbase length of a CUDA versus a Challenger, which we've thoroughly discussed as we have fabricated all of the floor pans for the Challenger. There's a difference in wheelbase length between the Duster and the Dart. There's going to be a difference with drive shaft lengths. Wow, that light makes my hand look green. Squirrels! There's a difference in the drive shaft length depending upon your transmission rear end combination. So if you have a 4-speed A833 transmission with an 8 3/4 rear end, versus a 7 1/4. There's going to be about a 1/2 inch difference in drive shaft length. If you have a 9 3/4 rear end, 9 1/4 rear end, there's going to be about a 1/4 of an inch difference in drive shaft length, maybe between that and the 8 3/4, something like that, between a 1/2 and a 1/4. Because your ring gear sizes determines where your pinion length is, and of course pinion, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just the ring gear, but it's how long they make the pinion shaft and all that kind of stuff. But as a general rule, each difference in the combination is going to make a difference. Some vehicles, the 904, for example, in an A body, the 904 transmission is the same drive shaft as an A833 with an 8 3/4, because the A body drive shaft transmission is short, like a 904. In other vehicles like these, the 727 in the A833 takes basically the same drive shaft length, because the tail shaft length on the 727 makes it an overall similar length to an A833. So you can't say that all 4-speeds are the same as 904s or all 4-speeds are the same as 727s. And while I'm talking a lot of Mopar geek jargon, and I may have some of that information wrong, and I know that there'll be people who will correct me. I'm very open to being corrected in other information. I'm always learning. The principles that we're talking about today apply to any make or model. So do your research, find your numbers, but actually before you get gung-ho on something, make sure you've done your actual measuring to be sure that what you're using is the right stuff. Well, I think that's going to do it for this one. It's really good to have this car unearthed. I spent quite a bit of time in here a few weeks back and unearthed the engine compartment and got all that stuff taken out, and just wanted to be able to get at this car in preparation for getting this inner rocker panel put on, so that we can make the big step forward and get our torsion bar cross member put in, which has been sitting patiently back there in a box on the floor for about a year now. We have the fabricated floor pan for the under seat area fairly well done. We purchased the front floor pan and the rear floor pan. Nope, the 2 front floor pans. We purchased those from Sherman. I don't think we bought a rear seat pan, because those are pretty simple to make, and I think I was going to make that one, but I don't remember. But we have most of what we need to knock this thing together so that we can get it on the rotisserie as soon as stitches comes off. Now, we're not going to strip everything out of this car when we put it on the rotisserie, so I do need to check the weight and be sure that it will handle it. But I think to finish this car properly, no, we're not doing a restoration. We're doing a preservation. We're going to put it back to where it was sometime in the late 70s or early 80s, when it was an active drag racing car, when Bob still had the 340 in it before he put the crate motor in it. So we're going to be redoing the lettering and sprucing all this stuff up and putting the proper stickers back on the car. We're going to be fixing the rust and blending the paint to make it look as good as possible, to bring it back and preserve it as a vintage drag car that was on the track from this is a 70. This car was on the racetrack from 1971 until sometime in the early 80s, when Bob stopped driving it, and it was officially parked by 1985. Bob picked up another car and put the motor out of this, which he had the crate motor in it, a 360, and he put that in the orange one, and then he campaigned that one for quite a few years. So we're putting the 340 back in it. We're not putting the 3-speed back in it, but this is a numbers matching car. We have all the numbers matching parts for it, but we're not restoring it. We're preserving it as a vintage drag car. We feel that that's just more important to pay tribute to Bob and his family, and keep this car as it was remembered by so many people at the drag strip, weekend after weekend after weekend. All right, that's going to do it for this one. We will catch you on the next one. There's going to be a lot more interesting things coming. We're going to be back and hot and heavy on stitches with fabrication real soon, but the next focus, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm getting the shop ready to get this thing painted. And I think the next step on the 86 Dodge pickup is going to be painting inside the cab and getting that done. And then the outside will go relatively quickly. All right, that'll do it. We will catch you on the next one. And don't forget, it's important. Rock!